So we are here at the Titan Missile Museum in Tucson. About to get our briefing. We are on a scheduled tour. We're going to tour everything. There's a preview of what we're going to be looking at. So this is the blast door. That would obviously be closed if there was a launch in progress.
As long as you see past this sign, then we're all good. If you are standing in front here, I ask that you will sit down on the bench just so the people behind you can see. This is actually a 3-story building, and we're currently on the center floor. This floor is the proper control center for monitoring the missile, and where the crew would spend most of their time. I'll go over it more in just a minute though. Upstairs is the crew quarters. That has some bunk beds, a bathroom, and a kitchen for our crew to use, and is the only place in the entire complex that anyone on the crew is allowed to be alone. Everywhere else had a no lone zone policy, or a buddy system basically, to make sure everyone knew where everyone was at, and to keep them safe if anything happened, so that someone was always there to help. Now, below us, the 3rd floor, is the facilities room. And that basically just has some electricity and plumbing supplies, as well as a backup generator, just kind of boring stuff to keep the building running. But it also has an emergency escape hatch. If our crew needed to get out of here, and for whatever reason couldn't go out through the blast lock doors, there was kind of a mini blast lock door down there that would open up a hole in the wall, and that would lead to a ladder that would go all the way to the very top. So we have a way out in case something goes wrong. Now, you may have also noticed on the way in here, these large springs around the room. There's 8 of them. These are shock isolating springs that, along with the 12-inch gap between the floor and the walls that you stepped over on the way in here, means that this entire building is suspended underground, entirely on those springs. That's so if the ground nearby is shaking from an earthquake or a near-miss nuclear strike, this building will be kept stable while the ground around is shaking. That's part of that hardened area protection to keep the crew safe in here. Now, our crew is made up of 4 different people. They included 2 officers and 2 enlisted personnel. The officers were the Missile Combat Crew Commander, or just Commander for short, and the Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander, or we just call him Deputy. They were the only ones allowed to have firearms anywhere on the complex, and were generally in charge of keeping track of where everyone was at all times. The deputy actually had to write down their location to keep track of that on this whiteboard right here. Then our 2 enlisted personnel included the BMAT and the MFT. BMAT stands for Ballistic Missile Analyst Technician. They were in charge of monitoring the missile and its guidance system, and most of their work would be on these big panels right here, with that one being the targeting system. Excuse me. Now, the MFT stands for Missile Facilities Technician, and they were more in charge of keeping the buildings running. So they would be doing some work in the silo, maintaining it. They'd be doing some work downstairs for this building, and they could do some monitoring on this smaller panel right here. Then, that's our crew of 4, but they did have those designated roles, but they would often help each other out. The BMAT and the MFT would often go work together in the silo, so they would help each other out a little bit, but that was just their designated roles. Now, our crew of 4 was down here for 24 hours at a time. It's kind of a long time to be spending, mostly in one room underground, so what were they doing? Well, when they first got here, they would examine every lever and switch and knob and basically everything you see in here. And they'd be so thorough with it, it would take about 4 hours to do. If that sounds kind of tedious, they'd actually have to do it again 12 hours into their shift. So that's 8 hours every time you're down here, just double and triple checking everything that you're pretty sure already works in the first place. That's making absolutely certain they know it works in case they need to launch at a moment's notice, so that everything goes according to plan. Now, another 4 hours were allowed to each crew member as part of their personal time they could spend upstairs. This is when they could eat a meal or take a nap. A lot of the enlisted personnel were in college at the time and would do homework. Basically just a little bit of time to get away from the job Take a little bit of a break. That leaves us with half of our shift left. There's still 12 hours to go. While there were some drills and exercises that they could run in this room, it wouldn't take up 12 hours. So most of the job was actually just waiting around. It was very boring. When it wasn't very stressful, at least, it was very boring. Now, if I could get a volunteer for our Missile Combat Crew Commander, here, I'll have you sit in this chair. If anyone would like to volunteer as the deputy, you get the other company chair. If not, I'll just pick someone. So, if anyone wants to. Alright, here we go. We're good deputy. Highly trained crew, ready to go. So, here's a quick pop quiz, though, while they're getting ready for their work. Who's the one person in the U.S. that can authorize an ICBM launch? President, absolutely. The president wouldn't be doing so unless there were already incoming missiles. These were intended as retaliatory weapons, not first strike weapons. The whole point was that we didn't want to launch them, but we could if we absolutely had to. So if we had to, the president would decide that order within about 10 minutes of hearing that there were incoming missiles. Then, if they gave the order yes, it would be transmitted to the Pentagon, who would then transmit it to Strategic Air Command in Omaha, Nebraska, whose job it is to then give that message, that order, to all of the silos, planes, and submarines in the U.S. that are equipped with nuclear warheads. That includes this one here. So if you guys have been down here for like 20 hours already, and you've done your checks, and you've taken your break, and you just wanted to go home, you might hear something come on the radio kind of like this. Alright, so some really clear instructions, right? We know exactly what we're doing now? No,
More or less.
Yeah, pretty much.
More or less.
So the officers were trained as soon as they heard that first alarm, they would take these red binders, open them up, and start writing down that message as they heard it. Then to absolutely make sure they got it all correct, they would actually then exchange binders, which you can if you'd like. And the message would play a second time for them to then write down the message again in the other's binder. So there'd be four little codes written down, and they could match them all up to make sure they got everything right. Did you guys get everything written down right? Yep. Up to this?
More or less.
Alright. Between the four of them, I think you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Alright, so cool. We have our code written down, but it's still just a code, so we have to figure out what to do with it. This is the point that the officers would go to that red safe there in the corner, called the Emergency War Order Safe. You'll notice the two padlocks keeping it closed. Each of those were personal property of each individual officer. They were the only one in the entire world that knew their own lock code, not even their superior officers knew. And they actually had to take their lock with them when they left, and the incoming crew would replace it with their own. That's to make sure only the two people that are even allowed to get in there can ever get in there at any point. In this case, we're allowed though, so we would open those locks and then pull out things inside, which would be, first, the launch keys, if we need them. That's why there's locks on it. We don't really want to give those out to everyone. But then more important for now is a bunch of these envelopes referred to as cookies. Now we'd want to look through all these and match up these first two big characters with part of that message we wrote down. Then once we found the right one, it would actually look a little bit more like this, with this kind of case around it. That's because they would have to crack it open, literally, like a fortune cookie, which is why they're named that. And then once they pulled out the envelope inside, they could then open the envelope and pull out the instructions inside of the hat. Whole bunch of things. Then, wasn't complicated enough already, this code, or this card, is an even more code. That's because we have to match up this code to that message we wrote down to make sure it's all verified and working correctly. But this card has 3 pieces of information on it that we need to decode and make sure it's all correct. The first is an authentication code, proving that this is actually a launch order from the president. Now, we don't really care if it's not from the president because we can't launch if it's not them. So, that's why we need to verify it. And then, once that's been verified, that it is from the president, we have the second piece of information called the butterfly valve lock code. Now, that's because on the missile there are 4 butterfly valves, and this is a cutaway of one, kind of what it looks like. These basically separate the liquid fuel from the oxidizer, which are hypergolic, meaning that as soon as those propellants come into contact with each other, they ignite, basically start to explode. We don't want that to happen right now because we're not launching our missile yet. So that's why we keep this closed and keep those separated. And we also keep it locked to make sure it doesn't open. Once that code would be read out from the commander to the BMAT, it would be inserted right here, and then that would unlock the valves but not open them yet. Then the final piece of information on this card is the time of launch. Now, does anyone happen to know exactly what time it is right now in Washington, D.C., where the president would be giving the order from? If we were launching right now.
1625.
Something like that. What about in Omaha, Nebraska, where Strategic Air Command is?
1525?
Something like that. That actually sounds right. There's also backup Strategic Air Command in California that they may be getting the orders from. And you also have to factor in that we don't follow daylight savings time here in Arizona, so depending on the time of year, it changes the hours that are off. So, kind of stressful to try and calculate that while you're trying to launch an ICBM. So the military just uses Zulu time, which is represented on this clock here. It's the same as Greenwich Mean Time, time zone that all time zones are based on. If you use Zulu time, it's the same time everywhere in the world, keeps things nice and simple. And since they can see it right here, we know exactly when we're launching, no calculations necessary. Now we have this entire card decoded, but is there still a piece of information we need before we launch?
Where are we going?
Exactly, that's kind of important to know. Where are we sending it? Now each of these silos had 3 pre-programmed targets when they were built, and the crew could freely swap between those 3 if they were ordered. Now, Commander, which target are we pointed at right now?
We are on target 2.
Target 2. Target 2 is the default for this silo, and as far as we know, we never actually changed it off of Target 2, at least in this silo. Now, does anyone have a guess of where Target 2 is in the world?
Moscow.
Moscow would make a lot of sense.
Beijing.
Beijing would also make a lot of sense. I've heard like St. Petersburg, even Cuba. Probably somewhere in the Soviet Union would make sense.
Yeah.
But the crew wouldn't know. It'd be kept classified from them, so that they weren't thinking of what city or what people they were sending a missile to. So that keeps things simpler for them, and also basically lets the government trust them more, knowing that they are more likely to follow orders if they are given them, because they're not thinking about it. Unfortunately, the location of Target 2 is still classified to this day, so I don't know where it is either. Your guess is as good as mine. That's a little bit unsatisfying, but at least we have our orders. We know it's Target 2, so we'll move forward now. Now that we have all of our information, we would actually turn the keys and launch the missile, but it goes by pretty quick, so I'll tell you what happens first. When we turn the keys, you'll see these 7 lights start to pop up in order here. The first one is the launch enable light. That's saying that that butterfly valve lock code we put in earlier is correct. Basically, everything's good to go from here. The second light is the battery activated light. Because on the missile, there are 2 dry batteries, meaning they've never held a charge. And above them is a bag of liquid electrolytes that at this point would be pierced and would drain onto those batteries, which would charge them. Electrolytes are like salt and water that basically give a charge, if that's what you're asking. Anyways, the point is, this segment of charging those batteries is the longest segment in this entire launch sequence, and it would take about 28 seconds just by itself. Then once those batteries were done charging, the third light saying APS power will come on. That's the missile saying it has now disconnected from the silo's power, is exclusively running on those batteries. Then the fourth light will come on saying silo soft. That one, you'll hear a ringing alarm behind me at the same time. That alarm is this TPS-39 system, or TIPCs is what they normally call them. You may have actually seen those up top side. They're kind of these scoop mechanisms that face each other. That's because back in the day, they would shoot an infrared laser between themselves, and if anything crossed that laser, it would set off this alarm. That helps the crew down here know if someone's up there tampering with their stuff. But in this case, no one's up there. It is a 760-ton silo door opening over the course of about 15 seconds, crossing one of those lasers, triggering that alarm. So for us down here, it just means the door's open. Then the fifth light, wherever that is, says guidance go. That is the missile saying it has its guidance system that was calculated here, now saved into memory. So it knows where it is currently on Earth, it knows where Target 2 is on Earth, even if we don't, and it has its instructions on how to get there. Then the sixth light will come on saying fired engines. That one you'll hear a klaxon alarm play for just a couple seconds. That's basically the fire alarm for the silo. That's not a sound you ever want to hear when you're working in here. It's very scary to hear that because we don't really have a way to stop a fire in the silo.
Ooh, yeah.
In this case, though, it's not an uncontrolled fire. It just means that these engines have ignited, these butterfly valves have opened, and that's what our fire is the propellants mixing, causing lift, basically. Then immediately after that, the final light saying liftoff will come on. That means that the pins holding the missile in its silo have disconnected, and since our engines are already going, the missile's now in flight on its way out of here. So I'll go over it a little bit again as it's happening, just to refresh you. But are you guys ready to launch a missile?
Yes, we are.
As ready as ever be. All right. So Commander, your key is right here. I'll take this binder. And then Dick, your key is way over here. Might need to stand up to reach it. Now, did we notice something about these keys?
They're far apart.
Far apart. One person can't turn both at the same time. So even if they really, really wanted to start World War III all by themselves, they couldn't. Always took two people no matter what. Now, whenever both of you are ready, I'll have the commander count down 3, 2, 1, launch. Then on launch, both of you will turn your key to the right or clockwise, whichever is easier thing. And you'll hold for just a couple seconds. Whenever you're ready.
3, 2, 1.
All right, you're all good. You can let go now. So, at this point, there is no abort launch button. There is no self-destruct button. The point of no return for the officers here was turning the keys. There's nothing they can do to stop this missile from launching. Should be kind of sinking in at this point. We launched our ICBM, and there's nothing we can do about it. Especially tense during those first 28 seconds of the batteries charging when you're kind of just waiting for something to happen. Then when the batteries are done, the APS power light will come on, saying that the missile is disconnected from the silo power, and it'll start to open the silo doors. That's the silo door opening, because the tipsy alarm went off. Then guidance go, the missile now knows where it's going, and where it is, has it saved in the memory. It'll start to fire up these engines and open these butterfly valves any second now. And then lift off. It's out of here. Now that's pretty quick, huh? That was an accurate representation of how long it would have taken.
Then what do they do?
We'll get to that in just a minute. Now, how long do we think that was from turning the keys to lift off?
Just 45 seconds?
A little bit more. Almost exactly. It's 58 seconds. That is a huge improvement over the previous generation of missiles, the Titan I and Atlas. Those had a launch time of about 30 minutes. That's because those had to come partway out of the silo, fuel up with their fuel, then go back in the silo, and then launch. Whereas the Titan II used a different fuel mixture, so they could store the propellants on board the missile. So all they really had to do was open the silo door and then open these. Pretty much it. Now, because our crew is so highly trained, from putting that very first message to turning the keys would have taken about 2 minutes. So decoding and writing everything down, going to the safe, pulling everything out, inserting the keys, everything was 2 minutes. Everything start to finish with liftoff was 3 minutes. So very, very quick response time. Now, we didn't feel or hear anything from this missile launch because we didn't actually launch it, don't worry. But do you think the crew would have felt anything?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, right? You can almost see the missile down the hall here. It's like a straight shot. It's not too far away. Except the crew actually wouldn't have felt anything. There's 2 blast lock doors that keep most of the sound out. But there's also 8 shock isolating springs around the room that keep this building isolated. In fact, the commander could have had a cup of coffee here on the desk and wouldn't have even seen a ripple in it from the missile launching. So you had a very authentic experience as to what it would have been like to launch this missile. Didn't feel or hear or see anything besides the lights and the alarms.
Would they see any movement on the springs?
They probably could, and they actually would likely see the walls moving a little bit since they're not connected to the walls. But they themselves wouldn't have felt anything. Now, after the missile would have launched, they didn't have any more communication with it. They don't even know if it made it that far to the silo. They don't know if it makes it to target 2. They don't know if it detonates. They have no idea. All their orders were is basically to wait here for a while. they had enough food and water and other supplies for 30 days in this building. So their orders were to wait for 21 days for orders to come over the radio. If there were no orders in those 21 days, they would then take all the food they could, go out through the emergency escape hatch, rendezvous in the nearby mountains with other missile crews, and then figure out what to do from there. Because at that point, there was missiles coming in since we were launching ours. There was probably not a whole lot of, Strategic Air Command or even the U.S. left. So kind of up to them to figure it out at that point. So luckily I never got there. We did actually get some close calls in this silo. The keys were inserted multiple times, but never turned, so never had a launch. But yeah, luckily it never had to happen. At this point, we better triple check that we didn't launch our missile, so we are going to head into the silo and make sure it's still there. It's just a straight shot down the whole cableway. If you turn off, you've gone the wrong way. I'll follow you guys in again to make sure everyone gets in there safe. So whoever would like to go first, go right ahead.
There's our fire alarm, which we just heard going off.
But this one here is empty, so it weighs a measly 15,000 pounds. That's because this is...
So for those in the video who haven't known yet, this is a training missile, meaning that even if we were somehow to reactivate this, which should be impossible, the re-entry vehicle would burn up and not hit any target, even if we managed to convert this for use. This is not the original missile that was sitting here. It was destroyed along with all 53 other missile silos, with the exception of this one, and the missiles themselves were destroyed. Some of the cases, from what I understand, were used for NASA space missions, but they were never actually used in a war. Interesting. So here is the fuel handler's equipment right here. And then there's an emergency shower in here. And this, for those of us who are siren enthusiasts, is the infamous last remaining Thunderbolt siren from Federal Signal. Unfortunately, as many of you see on YouTube, that they used to do test runs, they no longer do. So this could still run, but it probably won't anymore. So there is your control boxes right here. And that pin could be removed that you see right there for access to the controls. It really sucks that that they don't run this thing anymore, but given all the restorative work that went into this, I'm sure that if the panel were to be pulled off and activated, it would work. Like, you can see the main power to it is actually disabled, so. There she is. I've wanted to see this thing in person ever since I was a kid, and I'm just about the happiest man in the world right now.